Good morning, my trucking friends. Today we're going to be going over a topic that most carriers do not want to talk about. This is a question that was sent in by our good friend Thomas, and he wants to know what can he do about unpaid detention that he does not receive. Okay, we know this is a question that many truck drivers have, and the answer is not a good one. In fact, here's the reality of it. Truck drivers spend hours every week unpaid, and a study shows that the vulnerable workers' biggest problem is only getting worse. This is something that most carriers do not want to discuss, but on this podcast we are going to give you the good, the bad, and the ugly of the trucking world. While we cannot change the industry ourselves, what we are going to try and do on today's podcast is give you the best information we can to help ensure your chances of getting that detention you deserve. Now, truck detention is one of the most irritating things drivers have to deal with. Worst yet, it's one of the most common and unavoidable. Let's do a brief description of what the industry describes as detention. Here's a description we found at withvector.com. When a driver arrives to a pickup or delivery location, there's a built-in free time period for loading and unloading the truck. Free time is essentially what people consider a reasonable expectation for the amount of time that it should take the shipper to load the driver's trailer or at the receiver to unload it. The amount of free time varies from customer to customer. However, a good baseline is usually 2 hours. To put it more plainly, when the driver arrives to pick up a shipment, there's a reasonable expectation of 2 hours to load the truck. Anything over 2 hours is extra and would be considered detention time. Detention hours put drivers behind. Not only can they end up late to other stops or on their route, but this can also eat up the driver's hours of service. So that's the description they have. Those of us who are a part of the trucking industry know that it's a result of retail and manufacturing warehouses not being organized to get their shipment ready on time. On an article at Business Insider, here's what they found regarding detention in the trucking industry. Truck drivers say the waiting at warehouses for new shipments to load or unload is one of the most aggravating parts of their job. According to the article, truck drivers spend 2.5 hours on average waiting to be loaded or unloaded, and they're typically not paid for that time. In a study last year, almost 63% of truck drivers said they waited at least 3 hours every time they were at a shipping dock. And of truckers who were detained at warehouses, 9.3% said they waited a whopping 6 hours or more. A senior vice president at the freight marketplace Stat Solutions says, "Driver detention is an urgent issue that must be addressed by our industry. It's a matter of fairness. Many shippers and receivers are lax about their dock operations, but it's the carriers and drivers who are forced to pay for that inefficiency." So with the above being stated, the question is, what can we as individuals do right now to ensure you are paid for detention time at your next stop? While it is never foolproof because it is up to each customer whether they actually do pay for the detention or not, here is what our dispatch manager tells our drivers at ELE to do to help maximize our chances of getting detention. When the driver has been at the shipper or receiver for 2 hours, they need to call their dispatcher and inform them they have been there that long, and ask the dispatcher what the detention policy is on this load. The dispatcher should then clarify with the customer or broker what the detention policy is. For example, it could be $30 an hour after 3 hours. The driver should also politely keep checking in with the shipper and receiver who is unloading him on a regular basis. Then, after the driver is loaded, he needs to make sure the in and out times are written on the BOL and signed by the shipper or receiver. They then need to send in the BOL to the dispatcher as soon as possible. Those are some great tips, and here are just a few other things to keep in mind. First, let your dispatcher know when you arrive at the shipper or receiver by sending him a quick message. Consistent contact with your dispatcher is key in all scenarios. Also, keep in mind that if you have an appointment at 8 a.m. and you show up at 7 a.m., then the customer probably is not going to count that towards your detention time. But then on the flip side, if you are late for your appointment, then the customer can refuse to pay any detention at all because they can say you were late. Being late also can push you back in the order of who gets unloaded first, and you have lost even more time. As unfair as it is, you have to keep in mind that the customer is going to do all that they can to not pay any extra money. So the only thing you or your dispatcher can do is ensure that you're doing all that you can on your end to not be at fault in any way. We know these are not the answers you want to hear, but as of right now, this is the honest, ugly truth of the trucking industry. If you have any other tips on how best to ensure that you are paid for detention, then please reach out to us and we shall take them into consideration and pass the news on to the other truckers in our audience. Please do us a favor and go ahead and subscribe to this channel, as it will help us greatly, and be sure to follow ELE social media accounts. You can find us on Facebook, and our Instagram account is ELE_logistics. Again, Instagram is ELE_logistics. Thanks for listening, and we shall talk to you tomorrow.